Hey. I got theme music. Camera's good. What's up? Hey, I haven't seen you in so long. I need to come by and say hi to you. I haven't seen you in so long. I know y'all never get to hear the end, right? Alright, so give a good minute. So what's up, everybody? Let me know that you can hear me. I hope you can. You should be able to, but you know, never really know if you can or not. Matter of fact, play my song one more time while y'all coming on. If you've never heard that before, it's because you're not listening to the podcast. For shame. For shame. If you haven't heard the podcast, go on my website. Just go right on my page, click on the website, and then click podcast. That's it. Easy peasy. Alright, so hey everybody, if you're joining me on the replay, still make sure you say hello. That'll send me a message. I'll know you saw it. I know you've seen it. Just say hi to me so I know you're watching and I know who you are. So hello, good afternoon, happy Sunday to everybody. You know, I love you guys, and I didn't realize how much until I decided that I was going to go live on a Sunday, which means giving you my Sunday. Got my little bit of church in for today, and, you know, we're going to move forward. So, first thing I'm going to start doing on my lives is getting my affirmation. But so you guys can see the affirmation that I'm getting, you know, I don't post them always because your affirmation is for you. It's, you know, when you get your deck of affirmation, of I'm a 5-star woman affirmation cards, your affirmations are for you, okay? You don't have to share them to the world if you don't want to, but I'm going to go ahead and share mine. For those of you who saw me take a sip of water, I got my jug with me. Boom, boom, boom. I'm a little bit behind. I should be... Oh, no, I'm not. I'm ahead. What? Yay. I'm ahead because I should be, like, up here. But, no, I'm down here at the 1 o'clock mark already, and it's not 1 o'clock. But I'm thirsty today, so. From time to time, I will be taking a sip. So, are you getting your water in? Huh? Are you? You should be getting your water in. So if you want to know where I got my jug, like I said, go back on my page. I have a picture of the jug. I got it from Amazon, but again, on my website, when you go on the actual website itself, naturallycinnamon.com, at the bottom, you'll see a link to Amazon. That's my link. That's my list. It's not, I don't get paid or I don't get proceeds. I'm not an affiliate with Amazon, but I just have a list where I tell everybody the things that I like, the things that I recommend, and if you can find it on Amazon, I just put a link to it on that list. So it's just a list of recommended things from Naturally Cinnamon. So this Jug is on that list. So if you want to find it, don't know where to find it, there you go. So, all right, let me get my affirmations. Pick a card, any card, right? So let me just pick a card. Ooh, okay. So today's card is an emotional wellness card. You'll see here that it's yellow. Yellow means emotional wellness based on the directions. And you can't see a lot of things because of my light, but that's okay. And it says, I choose to be motivated and enthusiastic about my life. That's my affirmation for today. Well, that's my affirmation for this. I already did my affirmation this morning. I had my cup of coffee this morning. I did my affirmation this morning. I sat and meditated on it. Let it get, just let it get into my psyche, into my spirit, into my head. And so, yeah, I'm choosing to be enthusiastic about the rest of this day. That's my choice. But one thing I am enthusiastic about is helping more people understand a lot of other things that will help your emotional wellness, also your mental wellness. And we're going to see if we can span those things across your spiritual, financial, and physical wellness as well. So today's topic is boundaries. Let me tell you, my inbox, when I posted that, first of all, people were like, oh, I love Sarah Jakes Roberts. And let me tell you, I love Sarah Jakes Roberts too. And I listened to her podcast, Woman Evolve. I will be going to the Woman Evolve conference this summer in July. She had the first one last year. I was unable to make it because I had some financial goals that I was meeting, and that did not fit in my budget. But that's okay, because I set the goal for 2019 to be able to go, and that is in my budget, and I am going to that. So we're just going to jump in. I posted something that she did a sermon probably about over a year ago, I guess. And in that sermon, she made a statement. She was talking about boundaries, but she made a statement: you don't need edge entity, you need boundaries. First thing I want to do is give a shout out to Edge Entity. That's the first thing I'm going to do. So let me go ahead and see. Oh, I wonder if I can. I never tagged anybody. So there we go. There's Edge Entity, right? So for those of you who want to know what Edge Entity is, it's a company that, if you got some damage to our edges. For those of you women out there that look like me, look like you're in my age range, look like, there was a time where growing up, we tried all kinds of stuff with our hair. We tried at-home box perms. Relaxers, I'm sorry. We tried braids. We tried all kinds of stuff because, look, this hair, there's a reason it's in dreads, because it takes a lot to do. And so some of the times what we did was we may have caused damage to our hair, and, trying to regrow it, trying to get our scalps back healthy and to grow healthy hair. Edge Entity is a company that helps with that. And I had to look them up too, because I was like, well, she said you don't need Edge Entity, you need boundaries. I was like, what's Edge Entity? Edge Entity is a company, check them out. But anyway, boundaries is so important. And a lot of the times my clients, when we talk about some things, a lot of things affected them because their boundaries were crossed, because they have been asked to be stepped over the limit, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of things different happen, but when it boils down to it, you feel a sense of betrayal. You feel a sense of vulnerability, and a lot of different types of emotions and feelings can come up by boundaries being crossed either unintentionally or intentionally. And so we'll be talking a little bit today about boundaries. So, like I said, when I made that post, that quote, you don't need edge entity, you need boundaries. A lot of people were like, well, first of all, a couple people said, what's edge entity? But most people were like, yes, girl, talk about boundaries, yes. And so when I posted on my stories, my Insta stories, and if you don't, go check out my Insta stories. So on the Insta stories, a couple of people send in some questions, but a couple of people send them in through inbox. So, but either way, I'll be answering those as well. I am a woman who believes in boundaries. I believe in setting boundaries, but in order for me to do that, I have to know myself well enough to know what my boundaries are. So I do a lot of self-reflection to see, okay, how far can I go with this? how far is too far for that. And so I know what the boundary is. So I try my hardest not to cross it myself, and to be able to communicate that to somebody else so that they don't cross it. And then I'm left with trying to deal with the fact that my boundary was crossed and the results of that. So also, tomorrow's podcast that's coming out is talking about the residual effects of past events. When things have happened to you, how you're left dealing with them, and what do you do when you're dealing with them. So yeah, there's that. Hang on. Let me see. All right, no, we're good. We're good. All right, so let's go with the first question that I want to. Okay, what is a boundary? That's the perfect question. That's where I'm going to start, and that's where I'm starting. What is a boundary? First and foremost, a boundary, easily spoken, a boundary is a limit. It's as far as you can go. For example, if you're watching my live right now, hey, Bonafide Chefs, how are you? If you're watching my live right now, a boundary is, you see here in the live, how these boundaries, this is as far, you can't see when I put my hand out here, you can't see it because that's the boundary of the video, right? That's the boundary. If I put my hand up here, you can't see it. That's the boundary of the video. We've crossed the boundary. So that's what it is. It's a defined line. It's a defined section that, of limits, basically. You're setting the limits. So I'm limited to this screen. That's my limit right now. That's because these are the boundaries. Does that make sense to you? So that's the easiest way for me to explain what a boundary is. Of course, you can always look it up on the dictionary or whatever, but sometimes explaining what something is versus a dictionary and explaining what it looks like in real life may not always translate. So I try to explain what it looks like. I try to illustrate a definition. And the definition of a boundary, just think of it the way that we're looking at it right now. And this screen, my boundary is what's in the screen. Your boundary is what's in the screen. Now, of course, I can move the boundary, right? I can move the boundary. I can move it, but the boundary's still there. There still is a limit. There still is how far can you go. So that's what a boundary is. It's a limit that is set. Now, if it's your boundary, then it's a limit that you set. And a lot of times with my clients, they have a hard time setting their limits, because remember I said you have to know what your limit is, but you have to know yourself well enough to know how to set your limits. How far is what is your boundary, and how do you communicate that to someone else? Now, the tough part, it comes in with communicating that to someone else, but that's okay. We'll get there. First of all, what a boundary is a limit that either you don't let someone in or you can't let something out. That's a boundary. I have a dog. He has certain places he just cannot go. We have a fence, we have the garage, we have in the house. He can go any of those places, but he cannot come upstairs. That's his boundary. He cannot go upstairs. So that's it. But he also has, where can he go to the bathroom? That's a boundary. He can only go to the bathroom in that area, in that outdoor area. So he knows going inside the garage or inside the house is a no. That is not your boundary, okay? So it really depends on what your boundary is and how you set it. Hey, Sean, how are you? So that's what a boundary is, okay? All right, let's see what other questions we have to answer. Okay. How do you know when to set a boundary, or when a boundary is set? Well, just like you have your own boundaries that you set, other people have boundaries that they have to set. How do you know when one is set? Communication. Now, that is way easier said than done. I know that. That is way easier said than done. But it has to be done. So you have to figure out how it needs to be said. And sometimes we get upset because somebody crossed our boundary. But think about it. Did we really, hey Erica, did we really communicate what that boundary is? And sometimes we do, or sometimes we think we do, but sometimes we really don't. How do you know when a boundary is set? Unfortunately, oftentimes you'll know when that boundary is there after you've crossed it and somebody's upset. Excuse me. Sneeze. So, hey, we're talking about boundaries. So if you have any questions about them, any comments about them, just type them in and we will go for it. But the question right now is, how do you know when a boundary is set? And like I said, sometimes, unfortunately, because it's not so easy to communicate boundaries, it's not as easy as we would like it to be, that we don't always know that we crossed the boundaries until after we've crossed it. And then there's that reaction from the person once that boundary is crossed. Hey, Trees, how you doing? So yeah, we think about this. When I'm training, and I am not a dog trainer, but I have watched many dogs get trained. When they get trained and they are trained to go outside, if they go in the house, there's a consequence for going in the house, right? So once that consequence is issued because they did not follow the boundaries, then now the lesson is learned, oh, I can't do that. Oh, okay, I need to, that's what the boundary is. I can't do this. I can do that. So oftentimes a boundary, when a boundary is set based on the reaction of whether you did or did not cross that boundary. What we're trying to do is learn how to communicate what those boundaries are before consequences even need to be issued. Now, if I tell you that certain topics trigger me, I have a certain topic, it triggers me, then if I communicate that to you, and I'm like, this is why, I've learned about myself that if you talk about, okay, let me just give an example, a real life example that recently happened. If I want to go on, I don't know, date night. I don't know, I'm trying to think of something that happened. I don't know. So if I want to go on date night and I say, okay, let's go on date night, and we put our heads together and we decide when is date night going to be, where are we going to go, what are we going to do, then my boundary, because I'm a planner, I plan the rest of my day and probably the next day around whatever it is we decided we were going to do for date night, either that night or if we're going out that day, whatever it is we decided to do for our date, right? So my boundary is, if there's going to be a change, I need you to communicate that to me, because now I have other things that I'm juggling in my schedule. So if I say that, and if you don't tell me, I'm going to be frustrated. I'm going to become frustrated. If then that person makes a change and it affects the rest of that day or maybe the next day, and I'm not informed, and I become frustrated, they can't get mad because I told you, I informed you, I gave you ample enough time to understand. This is kind of the way I roll as far as scheduling. I just need to know if there's a change. If I'm not informed that there's a change and I become frustrated, I told you what's going to happen if I'm not informed. I'm going to become frustrated. Not that I'm going to get mad and go off and all of that stuff. I'm just going to be a little frustrated because it's like, ugh, now I have to juggle some stuff, and I don't like juggling. So now I'm being put in a state of juggle. I'm uncomfortable. I'm frustrated. I'm juggling. I am doing all the things that I don't like to do because there was a lack of communication when all I asked for was communication. My boundary is, when you communicate, I'm okay. If I go outside my boundary, you going outside my boundary, no communication, now I'm not okay. That's my boundary. If life happens, I just need to know that life has happened. That's a very simple example of a boundary that I was able to communicate to another person. And that's a boundary. What happens when a boundary is set by somebody else and they don't tell you, because maybe they don't know how to communicate it, and they don't tell you that this is their boundary. There's a certain topic that they don't want to talk about because something happened, previous in life that topic takes them back to that point, and they just don't want to go there. There's been a lot of talk about, sexual assault after the docuseries of Surviving R. Kelly. Well, there's some people that are like, certain things I just can't talk about because it sends me back to that moment when that happened to me, or that time when that happened to me. So if that's their boundary and they're like, I can have other conversations, I just can't talk about this thing, they're communicating that boundary to you. Hey, Karen. Hi. If they're communicating that boundary to you and they're letting you know when that boundary is set, if you cross that boundary, then you're taking a risk of receiving either a consequence, the consequence of whatever crossing that boundary is. How do you know when a boundary is set? The easiest way is by communication, but the truth is not always do we all know how to communicate what the boundaries are. And there are some people, like I said earlier, who may not know what their boundary is yet. Everybody needs time. We're all growing and learning ourselves and each other and other people. There may be somebody who does not know how to communicate that they have a boundary. They may not know that they have that boundary. So how do you know when a boundary is set? It's not easy to always know, but ask. If you're not sure, ask someone. Say, listen, did I go too far there? I'm not sure. I feel like I crossed into an area that you don't want me in. I feel like, it seems as though I said something that made you uncomfortable. It seems as though I did something that made you uncomfortable. Ask that person, and they may say, oh no, I'm fine. Again, they may not know how to communicate that there has been a boundary that's crossed, but they may say, yeah, what you said I didn't like that because, and now okay, now I don't need to go in that area or in that direction with that person again. I hope I answered that question a little bit, to know how to know when a boundary is set. And hopefully I jumped in a little bit on how can you let other people know that you've set a boundary. You got to figure out how to communicate that and you don't have to tell your whole life story. You just have to be able to say, yeah, look, that doesn't work for me for a few reasons that I don't necessarily want to go into. Just that right there doesn't necessarily work for me. I can't deal with that right now. Or I just don't like that. Be able to try to communicate when a boundary is set, but again, pay attention to the behavior of people to know when you may have, again, unexpectedly and unintentionally crossed the boundary that they have. Okay, let's see what other questions are here. Ooh, here's a good one. Why, when you set boundaries, people get mad at you? Okay, so if you are somebody who has set your boundaries and people become upset about that, I'm assuming that's what that question is asking. Why, when you set boundaries, people get mad at you for setting the boundaries? Well, I'm not going to say they got mad, because again, maybe they did, but is it possible that when you set your boundaries, that makes them uncomfortable because they're not, they now have boundaries? There are people that have been raised that they can just do whatever they want to do, and that other people can, have to conform to the way they are. And I've met those people in my life, and, not necessarily just my clientele, just in life in general, that are allowed to just kind of haphazardly go through life. And then here you come, you're a person that's trying to create some structure in your life, and their haphazardness and your structure don't exactly mesh well together. Yeah, that's going to cause some sort of discord with them, because they're not able to do whatever it is they want to do, which is what they're used to doing. They're used to doing whatever they want to do. They can no longer do that. No, they're not going to love that. Even if it's in their best interest, they're not going to love that. But that doesn't mean they can't learn that to work within whatever your boundaries are. So will they get mad? Probably if they're the type of person that doesn't have a healthy understanding of the benefit of setting boundaries in certain areas of your life. Then yeah, they may get upset because now they can't operate the way they want to, or the way they think they should be able to. So that could be a reason why people would get upset, frustrated, uncomfortable, whatever term you want to plug in there, or even mad because you've decided to set some boundaries in your life. And which is one of the reasons why when I do work with my clients on boundaries, I try to help them understand what their boundaries are so that they can communicate that to other people in a way that hopefully it won't damage any friendship or family relationship or whatever it is that they have. But, if you love me the way I love you, and if you respect me the way I respect you, if you have to set some boundaries in place, I would understand. Even if I don't totally understand what those boundaries are, I would understand your need to set the boundaries. But, I would have to now rework the way that I move, think, and act, around you, because you've set some boundaries. But I'm a person who believes in boundaries. If I was a person who did not like boundaries, my reaction might be, oh, so what? You telling me we can't go to the movies no more? Oh, so what? You can't tell it, that kind of a thing. I am currently in a relationship. Love my guy. But I have been in relationships in the past where, thank God I'm older now. But I've been in relationships in the past, young 20s and carrying on, where I've had female friends, girlfriends, groups of girlfriends, that when I get a relationship and I'm like, hey, y'all, I'm going out with him instead of going out with y'all. Oh, so you gonna leave us? Or, oh, so because you got a man now, you got to act like this? Yeah. Relationship sentiment does not always move the same as no relationship sentiment. No relationship sentiment doesn't have anybody else's feelings to consider. Relationship sentiment has someone else's feelings to consider. So yes, I'm going to move a little differently. That's the boundary. That's my boundary, is that I need to move. Okay, so this is, no relationship sentiment. This might be single, relationship sentiment that's like, okay, let me pay attention to this person that I'm in a relationship with. I don't want to intentionally do anything that's going to hurt your feelings. Just like I don't want you to intentionally do anything to hurt my feelings. So my boundaries with my friendships are, if I'm in a relationship, I need to have the room to be able to go and, spend time with him. If my friends did not like that, that was not going to change the fact that that's what I'm going to do, because that's the way I've set it up. I have had very few, it hasn't been a lot, but very few times I've had friends that got very upset with that and decided that even when I wasn't in a relationship, they were not going to be my friend anymore. And, and that's okay. That's your decision. I know I did not do anything to you to harm you. So if that's your decision, that's your decision. No problem. But when you set boundaries and people get mad at you, it could be for a reason that, A, they're a person that does not like boundaries. They don't understand boundaries. They've never had or set boundaries for themselves. So it's something to understand what your boundary is difficult, and so they just kind of reject the whole idea altogether. B, they could be a person that now sees that you are cutting off something that they were benefiting from, and now they're upset because they no longer get to benefit from what you've set a boundary around. For example, people set boundaries for different reasons. Let's say I didn't have any children. So if you want to go out to the movies and you want to come over to my house and eat and you want to hang out until 11, 12 o'clock at night, no problem. I have a child now. You can't do that. You can't come over and hang out and just, be wildly laughing at whatever video we were watching on Netflix or YouTube or whatever. My baby is asleep. My child is asleep. They have to get up tomorrow in the morning. Or maybe, I need some sleep. So no, I got to rework these boundaries here because my life looks different. So I've got to rework some of these boundaries. If that person gets mad because now they're not able to feed off of what they were getting from you, that's another reason that people may get upset, because they're not able to have the fun they used to have, because that's about them. That's not about you. So don't make that your problem. But that could be a reason that people get mad when you set boundaries, because they can't get from you what they want from you anymore. It could be that. Okay? Let's go ahead and move on to our next question. Ooh, this is a good one. If you're watching this on the replay and you have a comment or a question that, maybe we need to come back and revisit this topic, or something, if you just want to inbox and not necessarily have it on the video, absolutely do that. Also, like I said earlier, there's a podcast episode coming out tomorrow about the residual effects of our past events. It's coming out tomorrow, so be sure to sign up to receive that podcast by subscribing on whatever podcast location you get it, or you could just listen through the website. Go to my profile, click on the website, and it's going to say podcast. Just click on the podcast and listen to it there. But it's going to come out tomorrow morning. If we are able to pay attention to the effects of things that happened in our past, we're able to understand what our boundaries may be in the present day, so we can communicate that to somebody else. Okay, so I'm just catching up a couple of people who might be either catching the replay or jumping in a little bit later. All right, the question is, I'm already in a relationship. Is it too late for me to set boundaries? I don't like ever really saying that it's too late to do anything. That's me and my optimistic self. Remember my affirmation from at the beginning of this video, I choose to be enthusiastic about my life. So I'm choosing to be enthusiastic and optimistic. And so I don't really think that it's too late for anybody to do anything. Okay. Is it too late to set boundaries once you're already in a relationship? I am going to say that I don't believe so. Now, you will have to delicately introduce what those boundaries are. And there's nothing wrong with saying, one thing that we're not comfortable with saying is, I was wrong, and I apologize for being wrong. I didn't take the time to think it through. I didn't take the time to really focus and process this thing, whatever that may be. And so my first reaction is not the reaction that I should have had. My first response was not the response that I should have given. I'm sorry, I was wrong. I need to go back and start over and go back and not maybe not start over, but I need to go back and revisit that thing. And so maybe when you began a relationship, let's be honest, when we start a new relationship, we're all, fuzzy feelings, clouds, peaches and cream, strawberries and ice cream, and everything is wonderful, right? It's new, it's bright, it's shiny. It's like buying a new car and nothing, brand new off the lot, and nothing's wrong, and everything's wonderful and it's great. Now, you've been in that relationship, you done had that car for a little while. You gotta do some maintenance. Gotta, check it out. Something's squealing, something's squeaking, something's knocking. You gotta revisit that, right? So maybe when you were first in the relationship, and first meaning, it could be anywhere between the first 6 months, even the first year, I don't know. And things were rocking and rolling. I heard somebody, I don't remember which motivational speaker it was, say that you should know somebody for 4 seasons, for all 4 seasons. You should see them for all 4 seasons before deciding whether or not forever is, the future is for you and that person. Because maybe in spring and summer, they are just great. Fall seems to be a little rocky, but winter was horrible. I don't know. So now you got through winter. Winter was horrible. And now you're like, yeah, where you just took me, I don't want you to take me there again. So now you find that you have to set some boundaries in this relationship, and it could be eventual. It could just be something you ignored from the beginning. It could be anything. It could be a lot of things. Okay, we need to set some boundaries. Again, knowing what those boundaries are, why those boundaries need to be set, because you're trying to either avoid something, or you're trying to avoid something happening again, or whatever the reasons are. Coming to the table and being able to communicate that with the person that you're in a relationship with, and being able to say, okay, look, this happened. Whatever this is, this happened. We kind of just let it go, and that did not work. So maybe we need to not just let it go, and maybe we need to set some boundaries. And the two of you come together to figure out what those boundaries can be in the relationship. You'll be able to express what you think the boundaries need to be and why, because maybe that's what would work for you, but that may or may not work for the person that you're in a relationship with. So give them time to process what you're saying, what you're suggesting, what you're introducing, and then come back to the table and say, okay, so what do you think? What do you think your boundaries need to be? And what can we do to put those, come up with our boundary and how that's going to work for us. And what's the consequence of that? If this boundary is crossed, what are the potential consequences? What are we looking at that may happen? What could possibly go wrong if this boundary that we're setting is crossed? Because, some people set boundaries in relationships that for one person it's a big deal, but for the other person it's not a big deal if that boundary is crossed. So what happens if that boundary is crossed? Does that mean that we're jeopardizing having trust in each other? Does that mean that we're jeopardizing remaining together? Does that mean that we're jeopardizing our household financially? Does that mean that we're jeopardizing, our mental and emotional stabilities? What does it mean? What does that mean? What could that mean for us if this here boundary is crossed? For example, setting a household budget, right? You got your rent or your mortgage. You've got your light bill. You've got your water bill. In some cases, you pay separate for sewage. Maybe you have homeowner association bills. I don't know, whatever your budget is, and that's a household budget, right? And then you have, okay, we're going to spend $200 this week, these 2 weeks, however much, on food for the household. Great. So you go to the grocery store, and now you've racked up $350 in the grocery store because you weren't paying attention. Well, you've crossed the boundary that you set for your grocery budget. What are the consequences for crossing that boundary? Does that mean the light bill's not going to be able to get paid this month? Does that mean that you're not going to be able to have date night? Does that mean that I got to stretch getting my hair done? Because I did. What does that mean? What does that mean? What are the consequences for these boundaries that we have to set? And maybe when you first got into the relationship, or maybe when you first got into the marriage, or maybe when you first started joining, your monies for household bills, you didn't set the boundary of it needs to be $200 for groceries, and things kind of got a little haywire. And so now you're introducing the boundary. Not easy, right? Not easy. But does that mean that just because it's not easy that it doesn't need to be done? Still needs to be done, but you can do it together. When you are by yourself, or if the boundary that you're setting is not part of a relationship and it's just you and you're just setting the boundary, you can set it a little bit easier and a little bit quicker. But when you're working with another person, setting that boundary means you both have to be able to come together and set the boundary and understand what that boundary is, and also understand what the potential consequences would be if that boundary is crossed. If that limit is not kept in place, now what? What are we looking at here? I've dealt with married couples who have, and let me tell you, there are married couples that believe that, okay, there was infidelity, we got a divorce. Okay, and then there are other married couples that believe there was an infidelity, let's try to work it out. And then there are couples who successfully work it out and they stay together. But the couples that stayed together, what I have learned from them is that they got together and set boundaries that weren't already there. Or they may have been there but not communicated. In these relationships, they set the boundaries, they communicated the boundaries, and they followed those boundaries. And those boundaries could look like, hey, Mr. Hales, how you doing? Those boundaries in that relationship or in that marriage with that couple have looked like, this is what we used to do. This is where it got us. That did not work. We are going to come up with new boundaries or reset them and communicate what those boundaries are and what the consequences of not staying in those boundaries can look like. And to those people that put in that work, they're able to figure it out. They are able to figure it out, and they're able to say, okay, here we go. These are our boundaries. Nope. I've had one husband say, if my wife is not okay with me hanging out with you, then I'm not hanging out with you. That's our boundary. And vice versa. And the wife is like, oh, my husband's not okay with me being out with you, so I'm sorry, I'm just not going to be able to be out with you. Because they have decided that this is our boundary for whatever the reason is. This is our boundary. We're staying in our boundary. And because the consequence of going outside of this boundary could be me costing myself my relationship, my marriage. And that was not something they were willing to do. So they came back to the table. Just because you're already in a relationship does not mean that you can't introduce boundaries. Just understand that being in introducing boundaries in a relationship when you're already in a relationship may look differently than introducing boundaries to your homegirl who y'all not in a relationship. You know what I mean? So just understand it could look different, but not doing it, I don't believe it's too late for anything. It's just how it's communicated may look differently than how you communicate boundaries with someone that you're not in a relationship with. Okay? I hope I was able to answer that question for that person that asked that. Those are all the questions that were sent in. Okay, Mr. Hale says, setting boundaries keeps one another from taking unknown advantage of each other. Yes, absolutely. Unknown advantage of each other. And I like what you said, setting boundaries keeps one another from taking unknown advantage. That's also called accountability. Very, very good point. That's called accountability. Boundaries keeps you accountable. Limits kind of keeps you accountable. And it keeps you accountable not just to others, but to yourself. So if your accountability is jeopardized, you're kind of showing that you can't really be trusted. Or can you? You know, can you be trusted with whatever that thing is? Can you be trusted with whoever this person is? Because if you are not respecting boundaries inside a relationship, outside a relationship, wherever it is, your integrity could be called into question. Could be called into question. And, you know, you definitely don't want to do that, especially in a relationship. You do not want your integrity called into question, especially in a relationship. That is not good, setting a good foundation right there. That is not setting a good foundation. So yeah, those are all the questions that were submitted regarding boundaries. I hope I was able to shed some clarity on that. And let me tell you, setting boundaries takes work. It takes work. It takes some self-reflection. It takes some truth-telling. You got to tell the truth. You got to be honest with yourself about what does and does not work for you and why those things do or do not work for you. I can easily say, you know, we do it to our kids all the time. Put some food in front of our children. Oh, I don't eat beans or whatever it is. Well, have you ever tried them? No. Then how do you know you don't eat them? You know, so the child has set a boundary for themselves. I'm not going to eat that, but it's an unjustified boundary. Why is that a boundary? How did that boundary come? How did we get there? So when you want to try to set boundaries for yourself, if you have not done so already, and let me tell you, even if you've done so, self-reflection sometimes allows you to reevaluate those boundaries. Boundaries I may have set for myself at 25, I'm 39 now. Those boundaries may not work and they need to be revisited. So keep that in mind as well. A lot of times these are some of the things that I end up working with my clients on. Boundaries, setting them, reevaluating the ones that are set, identifying what they are. Why are they there? Do they need to remain? Do they need to be revamped? Do they need to be reevaluated? Do they need to just be tossed out? Do we need new ones? And what would they be? And what are the consequences for going outside the boundaries? You know, what are those? So that's the live on boundaries. Setting boundaries without just cause is dictatorship. Yeah, you just said, oh yeah, you can't do that. Well, why? But why? But, you know, have you ever told a child, I love seeing this. Have you ever told a child, don't do that? And they're looking at you like, well, what'll happen if I do? And so you tell them, don't push the button. Now, you might know what would happen if they push that button. You might know. So you have a cause. But if they don't understand what would happen if they push the button and why it's not a good idea, then what's their little brain going to do? Well, let me find out what happens if I push this button so I'll know next time what'll happen. They push the boundary. They push the boundary. And so that's why it's very important to be able to communicate what the boundary is, why the boundary is, and what happens if the boundary is pushed. Okay, those are the three main components of boundary setting: what the boundary is, why the boundary is, and what happens if the boundary is pushed. When you find yourself needing to communicate to someone what the boundary is, try to incorporate all three of those things. What is the boundary? Why is that boundary there? And what happens when that boundary is pushed, so that that person can try to understand as best as they can, understand, okay, so this is really a thing. This is not just somebody trying to tell me what to do and, like Mr. Hale said, create a dictatorship. That's not what this is. This is really a theme. This really is a theme. Okay? So, like I said, if you want to continue the conversation on boundaries, you can inbox me or DM me or even email me anything. But I do strongly suggest that you listen to the podcast episode that's coming out tomorrow, Monday, January 14th, on the residual effects from past events, because understanding what those residual effects from some of your past events are, then that can help you understand if you need to set a boundary or if you need to revisit a boundary that you have set. Like I said, it's all self-reflection, understanding where is this coming from, okay? So, hey, Mrs. Hales, how you doing? I'm actually signing off now, but please, please, please catch the replay. Leave any comments. I'll still get them. Check out the website. You just go on my page, click the website and click podcast, and you'll be able to hear it. Like I said, it comes out every Monday. Try to make sure it comes out every Monday morning so you can listen to it on your way to work, on your way to, running your business, while you're exercising, if you exercise in the morning, whatever it is, you have all day to listen to it and give me feedback. Send in any topics that you'd like to have covered either on a live or on the podcast, and I'll be sure to get to them, all right? Love you all. Again, enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and I will talk to you later.